You know how sometimes you read the Gospels and you just wish you could see the whole picture? Like all the little moments in between the big miracles? Well, today we're going to explore how the writings of two modern mystics, Maria Valtorta and Luisa Piccarreta, are seen as these powerful lights that can help us do exactly that. And we're going to start right here with the Gospel itself. The Apostle John flat out tells us that what's written down is just a tiny fraction of an infinite mystery. I mean, that one line just blows the doors wide open for our whole conversation today. This deep, very human desire to know more about the life of Jesus. All right, so here's our plan for this explainer. We'll kick things off with that spiritual hunger we all feel. Then I'll introduce you to our two mystical lights. After that, we'll see how they work together, apply them to the gospel, and then wrap up with a little invitation for you. Okay, let's dive right into our first section, a hunger for more. This really gets to the core of why this whole topic matters so much to so many people. And I bet this is a feeling you've had too, right? We love the Gospels, we cherish the stories, but there's this little part of us that just wants to fill in the gaps. You know, how did Jesus actually talk to his friends day to day? What did it look like for him to live in that perfect moment-by-moment union with God the Father? This isn't about questioning Scripture at all. It's about wanting a deeper, more personal connection with Jesus. And that very hunger is what leads us to our second section, two mystical lights. This is where we get into the idea that God sometimes gives us what are called private revelations, almost like spotlights, to help us see the timeless truths of our faith in a new way, for our specific time. Now, this next part is super important to get right. We've got public revelation, that's Scripture and tradition. That's the bedrock, the foundation. It's done, it's complete, and it's binding on everybody. But then there's private revelation. These are totally different. They aren't new gospels, not at all. Think of them as divine helps, tools given to us to understand and live the one and only gospel more deeply in our own time. They are never, ever binding on our faith. So our first light is Maria Valtorta. Her massive work, The Poem of the Man God, is just incredible. It's like watching a movie of Jesus' life, full of unbelievably detailed scenes. The big focus here is on the how Jesus lived. We get to see his full humanity, his tiredness after a long day of preaching, his genuine joy at a wedding, the deep, real friendships he had. It just gives this rich narrative color to the gospel stories. And our second light is Luisa Piccarreta. Her writings in the Book of Heaven are a little different. It's less about the movie scenes and more about the deep theological blueprint behind everything Jesus did. She focuses on the why. She gives us this profound idea of not just doing God's will like it's a chore list, but actually living in the divine will as your natural element, just like Jesus and Mary did. Okay, section 3. This is where the magic happens. We get to see how these two revelations aren't just two separate things, but how they can actually complement each other in this really beautiful way. This is where Luisa's why meets Valtorta's how. And you can just see the synergy laid out so clearly here. Luisa will give us a huge theological concept, like live in God's will as your natural element. Then Valtorta comes in and gives us the living example, showing us scene after scene of Jesus never, ever acting from his human will alone, but always from this perfect unity with the Father. Luisa says, let Jesus live his life again in you, and bam, Valtorta shows us the very details of how Jesus did that, how he loved, how he prayed. It's this incredible pairing of deep doctrine and living drama. So that all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like when you apply it? Well, that's what section 4 is all about. We're going to see how these insights can make the gospel pop, almost like you're seeing it in 3D, and totally change the way you read stories you thought you knew inside and out. Let's start with a story pretty much everyone knows, right? The wedding at Cana. The basics are simple. The wine runs out, Mary tells Jesus, and then tells the servants to listen to him. But there is so much more going on just beneath the surface. So if you look at this through Louisa's lens, you realize this isn't Mary trying to push Jesus or change his mind. No, because she was living so perfectly in the divine will, she could actually feel the Father's own heart of mercy for this embarrassed couple. She knew that this powerful divine love could call forth a miracle even before Jesus' hour had technically arrived. And then Valtorta comes in and just paints the scene for us. You can almost feel the bride and groom's cringy embarrassment. You see the incredible tenderness in Mary's heart as a mother, and you get to see Jesus' loving smile as he realizes his mother's perfect union with God's will has just pulled this act of mercy right out of him, ahead of schedule. So when you put those two together, the lesson is just massive. Mary becomes our model for how living in God's will can turn us into these channels of His mercy. We see that when our will becomes one with His, our prayers become incredibly powerful. Not because we're bending God's will to ours, but because they're already united. And this isn't a one-off thing. This synergy works all over the place. Let's take another classic story, Jesus and the children. You know it. The disciples try to wave them away, and Jesus gets genuinely upset with them and welcomes the kids. So why was Jesus so insistent? Well, Luisa gives us that deep theological why. It's because the divine will itself is just naturally drawn to the state of a child, simple, trusting, and completely free of all the complicated walls of self-will that we adults build up. Children just naturally live in that state of surrender. And then, once again, Valtorta brings that theology right down to earth. She describes Jesus's entire face just lighting up with pure delight. We see him gently speaking to each little child one by one. And we can feel his actual sadness that his own closest friends missed the point so completely. The integrated lesson here is just such a powerful call to action for every one of us. We see that God's will absolutely rejoices in our simple trust. And we see that even really good people like the disciples can get it wrong when they focus on adult seriousness over childlike surrender. It's a call for us to actively choose that surrender over our own anxiety. And all of this brings us to our final section, which is really an invitation for you. How do we take these amazing ideas and make them real in our own lives, on our own spiritual journeys? So how do you even begin with something this big? Well, it's actually simpler than you might think. It can start with just a daily act of surrender, a simple morning prayer offering your will to God for the day. It's about shifting our prayer life from a list of things we want to just asking to live in His will. And it's about letting our service to others flow not from what we want to do, but from a heart that's just totally surrendered to His love. So, I want to leave you with this one question to think about. How might seeing the gospel through this dual lens, this theological why, and this living, breathing how, help you read these sacred stories with fresh eyes and maybe, just maybe, with a deeper, more personal love for the Jesus you meet there?